now going to have a panel reflecting on what we've just seen with the director of the movie, Franz Böhm. He's great. We are going to be joined on stage also by Rajat, here, Senior Director of Policy, Research and Advocacy at Amnesty International. And last but not least, Jacqueline from the Campaign UK for the National Unity Government of Myanmar. Please join us on stage. Help moderating. Give me just a second. And we also have obviously a mic for live questions during the discussion. So once more, thank you so much for joining us today. I think we have a lot to discuss, and I think this panel is particularly interesting because we have a mix of expertise and background that I think is going to provide a very rich discussion. And I think my first question is obviously to the director of the documentary. So Franz, you completely led this wonderful project, and now you're promoting it across the planet. Can you tell us in just a few sentences what you drove from the experience, what it meant to you, and then I'm going to go through the room for a similar question.
First of all, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for taking the time to see our film. And I think the first thing I want to say is that I myself here only represent a very, very large team behind the project. A team from 17 different countries who really invested a lot of time and energy, and we only had very limited resources to get this project made. I may be the director, and my name might be the first one in the credits. Doesn't mean though that all these other people, all these other crew members have actually risked way more than I have. And I think the first concept of the film was related to that team. We wanted to collaborate as closely as possible with people within the protest movements themselves. We reached out to 11 protest movements in total, talked to people on the ground very intensively, and then decided for 3 protest movements that we want to portray the film itself. Protest movements where you can see a democratic majority behind the core goals of the protest movements themselves. And in these movements, together with people, together with many volunteers, journalists, other filmmakers, activists on the ground, we were looking for a person that is not the loudest voice or the most popular voice, but a voice that represents the actual movement, that is a representation of the backbone of each movement. And that choice wasn't mine to make. It wasn't a choice of like 4 to 5 people, but we worked together with these people on the ground to find the right person for each of these. And I think every aspect of the film, not only the production, not only the filming, but also now the distribution, is based on that sense of teamwork, on that sense of community, on that sense of that we need to help each other out, and that we learn so much from each other. And I'm so glad and happy that we're here today, that we were able as a team to make this project, also as a very, very young team. And I'm so glad that we're looking at so many more screenings in the UK, but also worldwide during the next months.
Thank you. Give another round of applause. about Burma and discussing how we can get inspired by the work that we are doing with borders supporting each other. I want to ask also the panelists for a quick take on the documentary, the single message maybe that you bring home, and then you think that can enrich your work, your activities on the ground, in the office, wherever you are, supporting the pro-democracy front and senior struggles. Maybe Jacqueline, you want to start?
Like to document about Burma, please, I'll be here for you. So, thank you both.
Thank you very much. And just to say congratulations to you and to the entire team behind this. It's quite a stunning documentary. I think it's one of those moments that you're frozen at the end of the entire screening because you don't know where to begin. Three things that stood out to me. I think the first and foremost was the sense of shame, which one of the speakers talked about as well. And the shame is, I think, an overriding emotion amongst all of us right now that have we done enough? Can we do more? Because we are failing, and we are failing miserably unless we stand together. And that's the second thing that comes out pretty eloquently throughout the three struggles that we looked about is the spirit of solidarity. When we stand together, that things can change. And then it's hope at which the screening ended. And I think it's incredible that today when we look around the world, leadership is not coming from the people who are elected to provide leadership. It's coming from the people on the front lines. And I think the documentary captures all those three things. Pretty phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this comment. And I want to repeat that whenever you want to ask a question to the panelists, just raise your hand and Kunon will bring you the mic for a direct question. So let's now jump into the panel. As we said, the last 4 days for Non Generation has been about inspiring each other to fight for freedom, supporting each other across different struggles, and finding a concrete way to support. And I think this documentary fully embodies this theme. I want to bring the conversation back to the director. Franz, you are the one that met these people together with you. And for example, in Hong Kong, since we have a lot of Hong Kongers here with us, what's the situation now? Are you still in touch with the people you met in the documentary? What's the next step for them?
So obviously we have 3 individual storylines, and when we first started filming, obviously we certainly hoped for another outcome, and it's for all of us, I'm sure, very, very sad to see that the Hong Kong part, the Hong Kong storyline, ended in a very brutal way. The film and also in reality. I'm still in very close correspondence, daily communication with both Pepper, our protagonist, and also many of the other activists, frontline activists that we have seen there. I think actually the worst moment during the whole production was that we actually lost a team member to the prison in Hong Kong. Catherine, a production coordinator in Hong Kong, after the filming was completed, and not in relation with the project itself, but because of her activity as a first aider, she got arrested by the police and is now in prison for 10 years. And obviously that for us as a team, as friends of Catherine, was the most horrible moment during the whole production. And when we're speaking about how the situation is now for these people that we portrayed in the film, I think that's important to mention. Pepper herself fled the country. Pepper had to, as I'm sure some of you maybe also had to minimize the contact not only with her family, with her direct family, but also with many friends of her who, just due to security and safety concerns and reasons, decided not to have that much contact anymore. And I think her life changed enormously, specifically since the introduction of the national security law.
Thank you, Franz. Very clear. I think the situation that many individuals can relate to. Jacqueline, I want to jump to you before moving on to maybe a closing speech with Rajat. But today we spoke about Russia, Hong Kong, Chile, Uganda. We didn't discuss about Myanmar. And I think that even just to lay the ground of the discussion would be very useful for us to hear in the official sentence the situation on the ground and the struggle that's ongoing in Myanmar right now.
Yes, I want to start with the brief summary of our struggles in Myanmar. Myanmar has been under military dictatorship since 1962, and we have various different dictatorships. And during that, there's also several revolution, nationwide uprisings. So to get to the context of what's gone through, for example, through my life. In 1988, uprising, I lost my father, and he was a lawyer, and he was involved in the movement, and I was only 10 years old. And in 1996, again, a student-led uprising happened in Myanmar, and I was in university at the time, and mass protest was brutally cracked down by military, and we were arrested. And I was one of the fortunate ones released soon after. But my story is not unique when it comes to Burma, and there are millions of people who have faced the same fate or even worse. What I can see in our struggle throughout the time is the military that brutally cracked down, and then the world has seen and witnessed these events time to time, and then just move past. The world just move on. So this is very important now we're here, that we coordinate every movement around the world and try to understand each other, the movement, then learn from each other, the tactic as well, and then that's give us a lot of kind of, hope and strength as well. And when I go back to Burma again, is that last 10 years we have had a brief freedom for last 10 years. It was an attempt to do transition to democracy. And in last election, free and fair election, the government was overthrown by the military coup. Here we are again in 2021, facing the brutal military dictatorship. And it is this time I have hope, because all these revolutions that has happened in the past, we also hold the peaceful revolution, peaceful protest, that didn't work, I'm afraid to say. This time is different, we have hope, because we are fighting back. And we are, as Burmese, like a whole country is united as ever. And we have our government elected government that gave us a mandate to fight back this military regime once and for all. And we also have formed the PDF People Defense Force because we have to defend ourselves. We have nobody. And even the previous time revolution, after revolution, that UN Security Council, they come up with several resolutions for Burma, and that it always has been vetoed by China or Russia. So nothing has happened. So this time it's different because we are fighting back. And this time it's different because we are united. And this time it's different because we have a government that leading us to the freedom and democracy. So with that, also we have seen a lot of defections from the military itself, and some of them are realizing the wrongdoing, and also some security services that are joining the civil disobedience movement. So you can see that a lot of different things that are all coming together. That's why I'm here to say that I am confident that this time we will prevail. But one thing that really important is that we can't do it alone. We need your support. We need your help. We need international community to get involved, because this dictatorship, they pray for the recognition, and we mustn't let them. So, especially country like UK, that can use its influence and pressure to stop the China and Russia to block in the UN Security Council. And we need people like social movement, in an organization like yours, Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch. These organizations, social movements, are giving us a platform to fight for our freedom and fight for our movement. So yes, that's the brief of that. And also, it is really important to get the international governments to recognize our elected government, National Unity Government of Myanmar. So that's the brief about Burma. Thank you.
Very, very clear. And I also like the positive spin that you're bringing after sending so many sad scenes. It's good to hear the power, the hope. They still on the ground all over the planet, ingrained in the freedom struggles that we are trying to unite here today. And with this spirit, I will move to Rajat, because obviously Amnesty is like the biggest organization fighting for freedom all over the planet, in many different ways, from institutions to the ground. And so you have probably collected a huge experience in seeing solutions, tactics and solutions that work for freedom struggles and that led to concrete success or concrete advancement during the last years or decades. And you were not here in the morning, I think, but we shared one of our ideas that we want to bring forward. There is the idea of creating a digital state for freedom fighters, but also common citizens to unite and create a kind of like a transnational digital government to see eye to eye authoritarian states, but also democratic leaders, and push them to action. So this is just one idea that we are trying to create the process anyway. But I want to hear from you, from your experience. What are the most successful techniques and tactics that you're still deploying in the last years in freedom fighters and that led to concrete results?
Thanks, Andres. I think the answers were all in the documentary itself. Amnesty movement is famously built on the back of the membership of the organization. We are 10 million strong supporters around the world. And that's what matters, is the spirit of solidarity. Martin Luther King famously said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think that's the spirit of it. That's at the heart of it. And unless we come together in this struggle, the title of the panel that we had was David versus Goliath. And it took me a moment to reflect upon that in terms of what it is. It is David versus Goliath, even in the best of times, but if we let it be David versus Goliath. Somebody very rightly, towards the end of the documentary, made a comment fear is the biggest weapon against it. It's actually fear and indifference is the biggest weapon against it. And that's where the struggles need to come together. Because the next time you see a movement happening, and next time you see a struggle being reported and you do not act, that's where they win and we lose. Next time you see a protest being reported, whether it is from Belarus to Nigeria, from Palestine to Hong Kong, and you don't do anything, that's where we fail and that's where they win. And that's what it is about. That's the single technique that wins. That's the single technique that we need to actually keep it to the heart when we look at what we are talking about. The second is the tactics that are changing. You know, we used to famously talk about this technique of naming and shaming, but what do you do when the other party is completely shameless? So we need to look at techniques and tactics to retaliate which are defined, and which is what this documentary very rightly showed us, is defiance and the spirit of demanding and not taking no for an answer. And how do we do that? And this is where the threat to civic space around the world today is single largest threat that we are facing as a collective humanity. Because the more and more the governments are cracking down on civic space, the less and less space that we have to demand our rights and freedoms. So what do we do? And how do we expand the civic space is where we need to think collectively together, and how do we foster dissent to thrive, not be muzzled. Online civic space is one such dimension that we look about, but it comes with its own challenges. We are looking at issues where misinformation and disinformation is a tool that is being used by regimes to oppress the populations, not facilitate the civic engagements that we would want it to be. We also know that there is now targeted spying that is happening of human rights defenders from around the world. Spywares are being used, and this is where the power of the collective once again needs to come together to provide answers to the struggles that we face.
Thank you, Rajat. You really are like a perfect methodology book for how to counter this trend. I see there was a question. I have many questions for the few of you, but there is a question from the audience from Giovanni from Italy.
Yes, hi. Actually, my question originally was for Jacqueline. I want to thank for bringing up the situation in Myanmar, of which I was partially aware. And my question is, since I consider myself quite an informed person with the newspapers, but mainly Italian newspapers, so the quality is quite low, but I consider myself quite an informed person, but I wasn't really aware of the situation in Myanmar. And I want to ask you, the three of you, whose responsibility do you think is to create awareness of what is going on such grave situations going on around the world? Why I didn't know about that? Is it because I don't read enough, or is it because there is not enough awareness created?
Okay. I can only talk about the issue related to Burma as my own experience, is that since military coup happened, we had a very short window of opportunity on the mainstream media where the coup has happened. And now it's 9 months on, and when I talk about people say, is still going on? And people it's yesterday news already. So that's just the nature of the media that we need to kind of change, because the issues are happening around the world, and the media just moving, like flipping through so fast that the people also carry on in daily life that they never really have time to follow up, even though they may register it at that moment when they see it, because that's going to follow up news. And for us, on the other side of the coin, to try to get our movement on the media is almost impossible. And they are brutal killing, even something that you can relate it to yourself, like pandemic, for example, how the regime handles the pandemic, as that they literally use the oxygen for their own, and then deny the people right to breathe. So people are simply dropped dead because they couldn't get hold of the oxygen. And they blocked the aid, they blocked the plans for the vaccination, and they used this virus as a weapon against its own people. And these kind of news that you can relate it to, but you can't see in the mainstream news. You can't see in the mainstream media. So my conclusion is that we need to somehow, change our way of seeing the world in the media. And we need to do it. All of us need to be doing it to make that change.
Absolutely. Just to add another point to what Jacqueline said, to which I completely agree. The other thing is that there is also very targeted shutting down of media that is happening. One of the most attacked communities in context of crisis situations is that of journalists and reporters. The number of, if you look at the frontline defenders data for the last year, the number of killings that have exponentially gone highest in the last year, surprisingly even within COVID, accidents at all. But the additional dimension is this shutdown of internet and communication, which is making very, very difficult in the best of times to get data and information out of crisis settings. Myanmar is a very good example where in large parts of the country we are looking at ways, looking at situations where there is no internet. A crisis situation which we haven't talked about or referred to is Ethiopia. The Horn of Africa is looking at a very spiraling conflict which is soon to be engulfed in the rest of the Horn. And there is large-scale internet shutdown across the country. So how do you get credible information that you need in order to do the documentation and to do the reporting? So indeed, while the mainstream media is not giving the kind of space it needs to highlight the kind of situations that we're discussing, the back end of the challenge is equally phenomenal, where governments are very targetedly shutting down internet and media outlets so that they are not able to report the reality.
So these are two very, very important points. And just speaking about, or from my experience in the film industry, actually getting a distributor, so a company which distributes, which makes this film visible in the UK and in Germany, was extremely difficult. And why? Because this film is not talking about an European issue. Although I would say that these topics, so justice, democracy, climate, also affect us, still the protagonists themselves are not European. Still the main story is not taking place in Europe, it's not about a domestic European or similar issue. And distributors have picked similar movies in the past, movies covering conflicts somewhere else, somewhere out of Europe. And the problem is that they just don't earn enough money, meaning there are just not enough people interested in these specific films. And that's not a critique. I'm not criticizing society. I believe that these films, when they come out, too often they have a bad visibility. Most of the people don't actually know that these films are in the cinemas right now. So it's just important that whenever you see a film, you hear a podcast, you buy a newspaper, that's always a decision that will be reflected in the future as well. We have a deal with our distributors saying, if this film goes well now, our next film can be about an issue outside of Europe again. And that's how we are in this very, very small environment of the film industry, are trying to change the industry's vision in their own way.
Thank you so much, Franz. And I just want to add one last thing. I think since we've mentioned many different categories here, I think there is a big problem with the political class. And I see it as someone that did a lot of politics and will continue in my life. I think, and the key example that I have in the back of my mind is Afghanistan. And I use it also this morning. I mean, the fact that 2 weeks ago, the whole political class was saying, we never leave Afghanistan behind, we'll be there, we will be present. And there's a news from yesterday, or this morning, that female high school will not reopen in Afghanistan. So exactly denying the very promise that our politicians, in the United Kingdom, Europe, North America, many other European countries have done to the international community to stand up for the right, at least of young women to study, has been denied. And there is no single action taken against it. Why? Because it doesn't play in any way in the political agenda of our leaders to invest money or political capital to fight that. And I think it's a huge problem. And so my dream is that in my lifetime I will see a politics politics will never be pure and selfless, but at least they take into consideration things that go beyond our borders. Because if not, I think we are going to fail. If not, we never solve all these democratic issues that we discuss. We never solve climate change. It's not going to be. But then our planet will go down the drain. I will now give you two questions from the back.
Hi, well, actually thank you the panelists for joining the panel discussion. Actually, we are live streaming on Facebook as well. So we got one question from social media channel. That is to the director asking, how did you actually find the cases in your documentary? Is it difficult to find, to get the consent from the protester? Because it's that some of them are fear to show their face in front of camera. So is it difficult for you to find cases and get the consent? Thank you.
That's a very, very good question. So that question I think applies specifically to Hong Kong. And that was something we thought about before we started filming there. How can we serve the protests in a way that we can protect the protagonist's identity and the protagonist's life by making that film? And our response to that was a very, very close correspondence, very close collaboration with both the Harvard Law School and the Harvard IT department, who were using their abilities to make sure that the film can't be used against Pepper and also not against anyone else seen in the film. They're using special techniques for that. So yeah, you can't identify Pepper just by having the material. Secondly, and that's I think the way more important human factor, we had enough time on the ground to have in-depth conversations with Pepper, for example, speak about how specifically we want to make the film. It was also clear that she will see the film before we release it, that she will see specific scenes while we are in the editing process, and that we won't release anything or that we won't publish anything without the total agreement from everyone. That applied to Pepper, that applied also to the other protagonists, also to the family of Abel Acuna, the boy who unfortunately died in the protests. And that is a general strategy of our team for this specific project. I have to say though, and that's something we experienced, I think it's quite interesting, that it was quite a big hesitance towards European and North American filmmakers and reporters. Why? Because quite often reporters went to Hong Kong with an enormous pressure. When they arrived there on Monday, had to leave on Tuesday and had to find a good story. A story for a 1 minute clip, 1 minute music. And often they ended up, as I mentioned before, portraying a very extreme voice or the most popular voice. And very often they broke rules. Unspoken rules. Rules like publishing pictures, publishing material without getting the clear agreement from everyone involved. And that may be legal in that sense, but it completely destroys the trust between activists on the ground and filmmakers who, in theory, could also be partners. But that status has to be earned by good and hard and honest work.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to share a reflection about what you were saying before. One of the things that, first of all, congratulations for the documentary because it was so beautiful. I mean, the way you have expressed, for example, the family in Chile with all the emotions, I mean, it was so good. But one thing I mentioned before is the importance of the politicians for being the ones to take decisions beyond the borders. I'm going to go a little bit beyond and say it's not just the politicians, it's also the people, the education. Where is the education in this? Because at the end of the day, if me as a guy who was born in a democratic country, I'm not able to talk and to tell my politicians that they have to go beyond what they have created and their own status, and not using international conflicts for winning their own interests, there is a real problem. And the problem is in the base, it's in the education. The problem is that if you don't look beyond your own belly bottom, you're having a problem as a society. Because you cannot say, okay, this politician is not talking about this is reality. No, the problem comes from the base, comes from the education. We have it, we have the internet. We see what happened, we saw what happened in Afghanistan. 2 weeks later, no one remembers Afghanistan. We saw what happened in Venezuela. Who talks about Venezuela now? Okay, they talk when there is important for elections, but then no one talks about Venezuela. And the problem is on the base, because if you don't create a society that reflects, that thinks, and they go beyond, what are we doing? We are entertaining as a politicians.
I think Omar is a very good reflection. And actually, when you turn in a question for Jacqueline, and in your experience, what's the best way to see this education, out there, to make sure that politicians, for example, in the United Kingdom, take action on these issues that are outside of the procedures? And maybe Jacqueline will start with
Yes, if I'm being brutally honest, I have been campaigning through Foreign Office, trying to penetrate through the Parliament to talk about Burma issue, and it's been quite some time. And what I see is the nature is that its economic interest is playing a big part in every government that make the change or move, and then also what will be the delivery of it. So, for example, that even the credential challenge is happening in UN for recognition of the representative of Myanmar ambassador, and then British government's answer is, oh, we're not on the panel, but we made it very clear, very clear where we stand. We're not going to give any recognition to the military. We're not voting for military. Yes, thank you very much for your support and answer, but that's not enough, because I want you to use your power and use your influence to tell the rest of the world, the other country, to make sure that military don't get their place. Because this is very important, not just about Burma, it's about the world as well, the world stage. Can you imagine the type of this dictator can sit in the world table, such as UN? Then that means, what is our value? What is our belief? The humanitarian, the crisis happening, the country that they brought down to its knee with the economic, and also the crime that they committed over and over again and again with their humanity. And is that all okay? That they can sit in the world table and be accepted? So I would say to the UK government as well, it is not okay. It's not enough do you say, oh, we don't agree with the military, or we don't recognize. No, you have got responsibility to make sure that they do not sit at that table. So that's my example of that. So it is actually hard sometimes.
If you look at the United Nations Human Rights Body, the list of countries participating in the embarks, from China to Russia to Iran, it seems like it's a joke. That's why
I'm sorry, I cannot answer what will make the UK government react. So I think that's a puzzle which many who want to solve. But just saying is extremely important, because I think what you were pointing out to is the fact that we often have a tendency to look at issues from a single topic, single country, single issue struggle, not recognizing well enough that there isn't such a thing anymore. You know, not only are our struggles transnational, but the solutions that we're talking about are transnational in nature. And I think the success where we see it works often lies in when we are able to connect these struggles together. In 1961, Peter Benenson started Amnesty International with precisely that sentiment. If we can channel the collective anger of each of us towards something, then we can make a difference. And I think that's where we need to go back to and see how we connect these struggles into something together. And I think the more you think about, the more you beg the question, if not now, when are we going to come together? If it is not about climate, if it is not about inequalities, if it is not about rampant abuses of human rights, what is it that we are waiting for? Afghanistan is one very good example where the entire international system just collapsed overnight, and we all stood silent.
Thank you, Rajat. I think it's also a perfect marketing video for a movement as a very global movement, and we are trying to build this digital state where people can join from all over the planet to try to bind together multi-issue struggle. Because I completely agree with you, the world is not single issue, it doesn't come from a single angle. Maybe it has never been, but surely enough right now, with the power of information that we have, with the interrelation that we have because we can travel and exchange information, there is no such thing as a single issue. So you can't even see democracy without thinking about other fundamental rights. It's a mistake that many do, or at least I think that many do from a very personal perspective. And I noticed, for example, when we're advocating with others for Hong Kong since we're seeing the team, there were many people that were supporting vocally the approach of Trump in the region, which obviously sometimes has also some merits, but how can you support such a person that then at home is clamping down on every basic rights of its own citizens? So I agree with you, it's very complex and we need to get used to deal with this complexity, otherwise we won't move forward. There is a question from Nicola and then another question.
Thank you for the panel. So a comment and a question. It's the third time I see the documentary, but I think it's only the first one I noticed. You included 3 female leaders, which I really appreciate. We tend to see a lot of those movies about men on the front line, and I think that's why actually I really, really like your documentary. It's 3 women, which is amazing to see. And then as a question, and it's the $1 million question, but this conference comes after 3 days of digital marathon, where we actually try to brainstorm together about how to unite and how to stand a chance in front of authoritarianism. So we have a lot of people in this room. What, according to all of you, is the single thing they should do, but something that is doable, right? Not something like strengthen institutions. What is the single thing they should do to fight back against authoritarianism and for democracy to stand a chance? And I know it's really hard and there's not only one thing, but it's just so it's a bit actionable as well.
Yes. Together with other Hong Kong activists, we created a very important and powerful website that is now tailored for Germany, because in 9 days we have the big German elections coming up. Quick side note is that in Germany we have 5 to 6 relevant parties which all sit in the German parliament. And this year we could, in theory, see the first time that Germany elects a chancellor from the Green Party. And what we have seen, what we have analyzed, or what we have explored during the past weeks, is that up to 40% of voters are still undecided. Because actually, and I can understand that, there are many good parties. You can give your vote to the German version of Labour, you can give your vote to the CDU, which has been ruling party for the past 16 years, you can give your vote to the Green Party. It's all sort of choices, I would say. And there are a few topics that Germans, in particular, deeply care about. Climate is one of them. The foreign policy adjustments towards China is another one of them. However, that is very obviously very difficult to explore. specifically because it's not a question that is easy to answer in a TV debate. It's a very, very complex issue. And some international activists and also Hong Kong activists created a platform where you can just state, where you can tick a few statements, how you think German foreign policy should be adjusted. And then you can see which of these parties are actually with you on that point. And I think that has been a powerful, powerful tool for a few people who were already, they decided they will vote, haven't yet decided which party is actually the best one for them. Didn't know. They didn't obviously read the whole party program to see what suggestions these specific parties have towards China. And that, I think, is a very, very helpful tool, especially also because it is quite fast. It takes maybe 3 minutes to do this. And I think that's such an important and powerful tool that we can use, especially when elections are happening, so that we are trying to find room for innovation within the systems we were born in a way.
Yes, I'm so delighted to get with this brilliant, fresh new idea that we might take on board as well. And also politics seems to be paying more attention here at the election time, so that's the perfect timing as well. And yes, in terms of the movement, that what we could do is that nowadays is that we have got technology in our hand, and even the pandemic, we have got Zoom and all sort of like we are constantly interacting with each other in a way online. So it's much easier now. Like 10 years ago in Burma, it's so hard, the movement on the ground to pass the message to each other and things like that. And now, much easier with the technology, internet and things like that. And then also, the Hong Kong movement was really vital to Burma movement this time, because the young generation, they were so clever, they were so fast, they were so quick to pick up the technique that being led by brother and sisters of Hong Kong and doing that. And then it has been successful in a sense of, they don't confront anymore. Before the past revolutions, like including me, we confront the military, and all they do, they just trigger happy. So you die there, then and then, But these younger generations are amazing. They are basically taking in charge of their future, and they will not trust or give chance for the politician or any other to do that. They are taking in charge of their future in their own hands. So I don't know much about the technology for me to talk much about the global movement, but I'm really pleased that people are doing it, and then please do get involved and just make sure that it's all it takes is to click a button. That's all it takes. So thank you very much.
One of my most favorite quotes always to use is one that comes from Joshua Wong. And when he was being arrested, he famously said to the group that was out there, hang in there, we will be all right. And I think that is a very powerful statement, but that is a powerful statement if we all stand up for human rights together, every day in what we do. And I know it sounds a little bit preachy, to be honest, and it does sound preachy to me as well, but there is an element of truth in it. And unless we do stand up for human rights together, we'll not be able to deal with it. It's never been easier. It's never been easy for, if you go back and look at the archives of history, for those who demanded this in 1948, and it's not easy for us in 2021. But it is easy if we stand up together. And that's what I think we need to imbibe as a spirit of a journey in these collective struggles that we face. And we have tactics, right? We have new techniques that we are using to expand the civic space, to take our battles to the virtual world, but also to try and confront, the same battle of David versus Goliath by turning it on its head. So let's try on one more time in the spirit of standing up together.
Thank you so much. We have time for one last very short question. I don't know who's there. Claudio, go for it. Okay, so let's start it. Okay, we pass the question.
I'm Andy from South University. I'm from some of your colleagues with you. I'm not doing that. I support a couple of democracy movements. One of the two friendships, one for Myanmar and one for Belarus. And I think the use of social media is very, very powerful, but in the end we're both very like human beings. And I think I like the way that you have brought together different diaspora communities in London. I would like to see to develop that more. So my students and I, for example, can support people in London who are supporting their communities around the world. And that might just become to a meeting or I go to shout at but I think there are people things to do to build the human relationships and to give them hope. So if you're willing, I would like to invite you all to the university in October or November, and I'd like the communities to tell their stories to each other and to the students and share ideas about what works and to build a sort of network for democracy in London, particularly between the communities here that are engaged with communities around. So that's not really a question.
I think it's a very, very welcome offer, and we are super happy to support this project. And obviously, we are here representing from many at home, and hopefully facilitate this event. Yes, I think it's a very powerful and very much needed, especially towards a young audience, as the one of the university that, as we discovered today, might be very hungry for news, but not having the awareness that they could have. So let's do it. Thank you so much, Andy, for this proposal. So with this, I think we are over our time. It's been a great pleasure to have you with us. Franz, thank you so much for your work with your documentary. You are inspiring people all over the planet to take action and also moving hearts here today in this room, which is very important. So thank you. A round of applause for Thank you, Jacqueline, for your advocacy work and political work at the people of Myanmar. I know the struggle is difficult to describe it. You describe it, but I know that you won't give up, and we'll be with you along the way. I'm sure that sooner or later, the Myanmar, the Burmese people will be free again. So thank you so much for your work as well. And last but not least, Rajat, of course, represents a huge organization that has been an inspiration for many of us in our daily life, and an inspiration for generations of freedom fighters and activists. So the only thing I can say is keep on doing it, don't give up, and please come back to our events because I think you're just a great inspiration for all of us. Thank you. And with these words, I'm going to end the mic to my co-founder to close this wonderful day that I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
So it will take 2 minutes because we are out of time. But after 4 days of Freedom Marathon, both online and offline, we are officially done, which I'm extremely excited about because we got insane ideas. We spent an entire day brainstorming on how freedom fighters can unite across the world. And we got people from Venezuela, Hong Kong, Myanmar, and Russia to commit to working together. I forgot Belarus. Then we spent an entire day discussing how to hold democracies accountable. And we had really crazy ideas, like creating the role of democracy ministers across democracies. So lobbying politicians to have a new role, I mean in English we actually call it Secretary of Democracy, and to make sure that we have best practices, higher standards, that we lead by example across the world, and set foreign policy based on democracy. And then we spent the last day of the digital conferences speaking about how to innovate it, or as I like to say, how to make democracy sexy again, basically. And we had insane ideas. Andrea told you this morning about the idea of a niche state that we'll start working on tomorrow after the end of the Freedom Marathon. So this has been it. And today, for the first time in 2 years, which has been a very, very, very long time, we managed to gather people in person to commit to working together, people who actually spoke to one another, created those human connections that were mentioned and are so important. And I like to end any conference with a very clear call to action, but I'll actually have three. My first one, and it will be very self-promotional, will be go on atlasmovement.org and subscribe, become a member. I'm asking you this because this is the only way, as an organization, we survive. We survive thanks to membership, both free and paid. And thanks to the amazing volunteers, and I see many of them here today, that contribute their time and money. So please go and do it. Second, go around the room. We're going to turn on the lights, and there's a protest art exhibition with descriptions, with artists that have prepared work from Hong Kong, Myanmar, Sudan. I'm forgetting some countries, but you will see it across the room. And last but not least, create those human connections. I don't just mean to talk to one another, you should. I also mean head to this table where Claudio is going to raise his hand and a paper is, and you will be able to write letters to two freedom fighters. We have been repeating this throughout the day. Our Hong Kong members have asked us to encourage you all to write a letter to two incredible freedom fighters who have paid the ultimate price for their activism, which is they're in prison and isolated. We are not asking you for political statements, we are asking you for a letter to create a human connection and support them. You can put your return address, and they will be able to write back, and we'll send it on your behalf. On this note, thank you for joining us for this Freedom Marathon. Thank you to the amazing panelists. Thank you to all. Enjoy the rest of the day, and come and ask any question to anyone with an Atlas badge.